First, just what enormous privilege it is to be here and to share Torah with you on this day. And so I want to begin with a story. The sun rises one morning, and two people awake, each in a different area of the same city. They are strangers to one another, but both are readying themselves for the day's High Holy Day service. The first, a spiritual leader in a community, prepares to support others in experiencing the ritual of the holiday and is filled with joy and anticipation of the long and meaningful day ahead. The other, a relatively newer member to the community, and is getting ready to go to the temple for the first time and is filled with anticipation of what the day's experience will be. The high holidays feel weighty this year, especially to this newer member who has had something they've been wanting to say to God. And this day, one of the holiest of the entire year, feels like the best chance to share a prayer that has so far gone unanswered. Now, each of these two individuals at the temple early. The leader is greeted warmly by familiar faces, those who return year after year. And the service begins, and the temple is filled with buzz and energy and joyous community as family members and friends find each other and participate in the service without hesitation. But despite arriving promptly and having anticipated this day for weeks, the new member holds back. Not yet comfortable in this new place, working on finding the courage to join in and speak aloud the prayer that has been waiting to be shared. Now, the service leader notices this new attendee and approaches them during a quiet moment at a break in between the multiple services of the day. Welcome. Tell me your story. Walk with me to the next service I'm about to start, and we can get to know each other a little bit. And here, in a moment of surprising bravery, the new member shares what has been waiting to be said in a voice that's more clear than expected, being the first words spoken that day. The words and the paragraphs have been floating around inside this new member's head, waiting to be shared, and they come out in a sudden cascade like a waterfall that has been blocked until this very moment. And somehow, as the service leader listens, both individuals notice a spark of something lighting up in the space between them, a feeling that something sacred is being shared. And for a moment, they both seem to feel God's presence. The exchange leaves both of them in tears. And as they join in with the next service, the other community members around them wonder, what has shifted in this space? What words were spoken? And what was so meaningful about this encounter? Now, this story is from the Talmud, and it takes place over 2,000 years ago when the high holidays were observed at the ancient temple in Jerusalem. You see, the Israelites would embark on a pilgrimage to make an offering to God, and the ritual steps of these offerings were facilitated by the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. Now, we don't really know what words, if any, might have been exchanged between those who were making the offering and the Kohen Gadol. Yet in this particular Talmudic story, we learn of one encounter when a conversation takes place between two at the entrance to the temple, just before the high priest enters the Holy of Holies. And our sages tell us that whatever was shared leaves both of them crying. Now, the story leaves me with many questions. The encounter hinges not just on the words that were spoken, but on the exchange of speaking and listening. What was the nature of their conversation? What were these tears filled with joy or gladness or sadness or fear? Why doesn't the Talmud share what was spoken? And why is it so important that God's presence was felt in that connection? Now, I like to think that maybe what mattered most wasn't what was said, but that it was heard. You see, so much of this holiday and our lives is filled with speaking and putting words out into the universe in prayers and reflections and texts and blogs and podcasts and sermons. But this morning, I want to explore the spiritual act of listening. Because listening is what makes our stories holy, and every sacred story or idea requires two participants, one to tell and one to receive. As Rabbi Sissenwein so importantly lifted up for us yesterday, listening is one part of how we sustain the fabric of our community. Because we live in a world that prioritizes speaking over listening, that rewards certainty more than curiosity, that often fears vulnerability and difference. And yet, Bereshit, the first words of our Torah, the beginning chapters of our Torah that we will read this morning, remind us that every conversation can be a beginning. The world itself was created with words. Our tradition teaches us that God looked into Torah to create the world, and God spoke the Torah into being. But for creation to fully manifest, it required a world ready to receive. And our own stories, our own shared words continue that act of creation. Yet creation doesn't happen through words alone, but also in the listening that receives them. Listening makes space for creation in ourselves, in relationships, and in community. Now, this is hard work because it takes vulnerability. It requires us to be open to others' truths, but to the possibility, not only to the others' truths, but to the possibility that they may change us, that listening might reshape our own story. Because listening and sharing stories is essential, because we humans are chemically wired to connect. Because science tells us that we're built for this. Our biology links us, opens us, and expands our capacity to connect with others. Studies show that when we are heard and truly listened to, our brains release oxytocin and dopamine, chemicals deepening empathy, trust, and connection. When we tell our own story or listen to somebody else's, we're not just exchanging information. We're sharing humanity. We're creating meaning. We are, in a very real essence, storyteller and listener writing Torah together. Because it's through sharing our story with others that we affirm who we really are. And when someone listens, truly listens, that story takes root and trust grows. Because listening and telling deepen our connections to each other and ourselves. And this is not just a personal act. It's a moral and spiritual imperative. It helps us recognize how we incorporate our truths. It builds bridges across difference, and most of all, it reminds us that we are not alone, that someone else may cry with us at the temple gates. And we need this now more than ever. In a world that is fractured and divided, storytelling and story listening is one of those paths to shalom, how we connect or reconnect and how we rehumanize each other. And we know that TBE is not just a place of worship, it's a sacred container for stories. Because here at TBE, where our elders share memories of generations past, where young children ask their first deep questions about God or prayer, where some sit in grief and whisper their pain aloud for the first time, we are all part of something sacred. And Bereshit is about creating. And TBE is rooted deeply in the essential elements of what it means to create that shalom together through Torah and Avodah and Gemilut Chasadim. Because when we do that, in a way in which we comfort compassionately and challenge lovingly, when we listen deeply and speak wholeheartedly, When we reach out and welcome in this creating, we not only build community, but we truly reveal the presence of God. And I think we do this in so many ways. When we listen and learn together in Tikkun Midot or in civil discourse, at a Prime Timers event or in a class exploring our purpose, when we create together with our hands in the art studio or in the kitchen with TBE Table, we lift one another up in our sanctuary in prayer, when we, different people with different ways of seeing the world, sing together in Holy Singers and study together in Minyan. And truly, and no hyperbole, there is so much more. So as we consider how we might step forward into these opportunities, we carry the communal obligation and social imperative to create spaces for shared listening, where our words and stories are received as our truth and not used against us. Because just like in this story from 2,000 years ago, we never quite know how our words and our stories will touch the lives of others. How our stories give voice to the sacred connection that we know can help shape the world for the better. Rachel Goldberg Polin, the mother of Hirsch Goldberg Polin of blessed memory, and the fiercest of advocates for the remaining hostages, describes the essential nature of listening. And she has a suggestion for us, for the Jewish people, when she says the following: I think our challenge as we limp forward toward the light, as we rise from the ashes that are still smoldering, is relearning how to listen. We have to master how to give space and oxygen, allow the person with whom we disagree to share their ideas and to try to understand them. And then they too should allow me to do that. So on this Rosh Hashanah, tell your story. Even when your voice breaks, there's someone who needs to hear it. And just as importantly, listen. Even when it's hard, to someone who sees the world differently, to someone who is carrying something they haven't yet said out loud, to someone whose story may challenge or change you. In telling and in listening, we take part in the creation that we will write together in the year ahead. Shana Tova Umtuka. May it be a good and sweet new year.